This is the Citizen True Crime Podcast. The Citizen Investigator is breaking the true crime genre. Instead of following the real detectives, this series follows the stories of real, everyday people from all walks of life, who for unique reasons are motivated to solve the most mysterious and captivating criminal cases in the world. Citizen True Crime Podcast is hosted by me, documentary filmmaker and producer Cheri Jo Bates. On this episode of Citizen, this is the Zodiac speaking. We begin examining Vallejo-Times Herald police reporter Dave Peterson's one-of-a-kind Zodiac case archive. Dave Peterson served in the Army during World War II and wrote propaganda to convince Germans to switch sides. After a divorce from his first wife, he moved to the Bay Area and became a reporter at the Vallejo-Times Herald newspaper. Shortly after, he married the love of his life, Muriel. They met in Monterey in the late 50s on the golf course. Muriel was a business executive at a corporation based in San Francisco. Then the Zodiac case happened in 1968, and it ignited a quest for truth in Dave. It's February of 2019. I'm in Windsor, California. 3 large boxes lay before me. As I sift through them, I can see Dave's files are a beautiful chronology ranging from December 1968 all the way through late 1988. Dave was very thorough. Each box is tightly packed with files teeming with all sorts of material. Photos, maps, handwritten notes, typed notes, photocopies, all pertaining to Zodiac. One of the boxes is filled with newspaper clippings. As I begin reading the articles, I can surmise that for 20 years, Dave clipped newspaper articles about local homicides that could have been possibly committed by the Zodiac killer. This is an example of the supreme dedication he had to catching Zodiac. Within the files are also personal notes Dave would write and leave around the house for his wife Muriel. I'll read one. M. This recent Sacramento homicide, which may be Zodiac's, is the reason I want you to pull the drapes at night. We also had a Walnut Creek homicide on a new moon Wednesday night with suspicious astrology. Love, D. P.S. There have been a number of motiveless shooting through window homicides, particularly in Oakland. Muriel writes back in the bottom corner above Dave's sign-off. Right! Exclamation point. Love, M. I found a very interesting letter written by Dave Peterson to Zodiac case enthusiasts. I'd like to read it. It can act as a foreword for the rest of this podcast. Here we go. I covered the Z case as a Vallejo police reporter. To me, it tops Jack the Ripper by a mile. In case you take a crack at breaking it, I offer a few tips. As confirmed by the FBI, Zodiac's signature and pseudonym are astrological, not borrowed from a wristwatch, gun sight, or microphone. Zodiac appears to be stirring a witch's brew of the pseudoscience of astrology and occult numerology in the cold-blooded planning of his murders. Zodiac was or is a disciple of the notorious black magician Aleister Crowley, thought to be the wickedest man in the world. As Captain Ken Narlow of Napa says, if Zodiac walked in and confessed, it would be next to impossible to convict him now, but it would be fun to try. Good hunting, Dave Peterson. Dave conducted audio-recorded interviews with the original Zodiac case detectives from all the jurisdictions. Solano County Sheriff's Office Detective Sergeant Leslie Lundblad, Vallejo Police Department Sergeant John Lynch, Vallejo Police Detective Jack Mullinax, Napa Police Detective Jim Husted, Sonoma County Sheriff's Office Detective Butch Carlstead, Napa County Sheriff's Office Detective Ken Narlow, and San Francisco Police Department Homicide Inspector Dave Toschi. You are about to hear audio files from Dave Peterson's Zodiac archive. The first file is Dave Peterson speaking with San Francisco Police Department Inspector Dave Toschi in March of 1977.
How long have you been at this?
Ever since he started in Vallejo.
Really? Yeah. Always in the back of your mind thinking about a book?
Well, not at the beginning, but later on,
Yeah.
Because to me, it's probably the most fascinating murder case in history. I think he tops Jack the Ripper, who he's patterned himself after some, I think.
Definitely.
And to me, it's number one. You saw that full typed message that he left, didn't you? Or sent in, rather, to Riverside.
Yes.
In caps.
I've got a copy here.
The thing that, to me, that cinches it as far as copying Jack the Ripper is when he says, "But I shall cut off her female parts and deposit them for the whole city to see."
Yeah.
And Jack the Ripper sent in half a kidney and said he ate the other half and so on, and threatened to cut off a woman's ears and send them in,
Mm-hmm.
And from this and a lot of other things, I think he's definitely copying
He's a copy.
Jack the Ripper.
Sure. There's no doubt about it. Yeah.
As Dave pursued the Zodiac killer, his research was the foundation of a book he planned to write. The planned book was to be titled Zodiac, Reincarnation of Jack the Ripper. Chapter 1, Riverside City College Murder. The facts. Cheri Jo Bates, a college co-ed, was murdered outside the library at Riverside Community College on Sunday, October 30th, 1966. Evening before Halloween at 6:30 p.m. Perpetrator disabled victim's car, nearly decapitated her with a knife. 7 slashes at neck, stabbed, lost his Timex watch, and a strand of his hair under her fingernails. Shoe print with plain sole and heel manufactured by B.F. Goodrich, sold to military outlets such as March Air Force Base in Riverside. Messages mailed after the murder used the letter Z at the signature, not Zodiac. Poem written on library desk with ballpoint pen, initials R.H. The Zodiac connection. 1 month after Bates's murder, the perpetrator sent a typed confession letter to the Riverside Press Enterprise newspaper and the Riverside Police Department. Then 3 handwritten letters from the killer, all sent 6 months after the murder. 1 to the Riverside Police Department, 1 to the local newspaper, and 1 to the victim's father, all stating variations of Bates had to die. These handwritten letters were sent to a trio, very similar to the way the 3 confirmed Zodiac letters were sent to 3 newspapers in the San Francisco area, each of which contained 3 sections of the infamous Z408 cipher. On the bottom of 2 of these handwritten letters from 1967, there is a small character that resembles the letter Z. Could this be the early mark of Zodiac? The Zodiac claimed responsibility in his March 13, 1971 letter to the Los Angeles Times. State Documents Examiner Sherwood Morrill analyzed the writing evidence in the Bates case and concluded the author was the same person who wrote the Zodiac letters in Northern California. Dave's files reveal his interest back in the 1970s in a suspect named Ross Sullivan. Ross lived in Riverside in 1966 and worked at the same library where Cheri Jo Bates was last seen alive. She was killed outside of it. Ross's brother dated Cheri Jo's best friend. Ross knew Cheri Jo Bates. Ross Sullivan went missing in Northern California during the Zodiac killing years. He died in Santa Cruz in 1977. Here's an audio recording of an interview Dave conducted with Les Lundblad of the Solano County Sheriff's Office.
Did you see that full typewritten message that he left down there, Les? Have you seen that at Riverside? Yeah.
I don't believe I have. Do they know that this is a suspect wrote this?
Well, CII listed as his production in their chart, you know, that they put up. He was smart enough to just send in a third or fourth copy so they couldn't make a machine typewriter, you know, if they found one. The average guy wouldn't know enough to send in a carbon like that, you know. It's on a type of paper, something like teletype paper that's used in a newspaper.
That's horrible, isn't it?
Right, and
I've seen that. I don't think that was made public.
no, this has never been made public. Here's that path that Cheri Jo Bates took with Zodiac. These buildings are owned by the college, Riverside City College, and of course it was real dark there at night. And she walked down this trail with the guy, and well, there's her body there. They barely make it out. The detective down there that I talked to seemed to think that she wouldn't have walked off with this guy in the dark if she hadn't known him. She would have gone back into the library and made a phone call for a ride, or something, rather than walk down a dark lane like that with somebody she didn't know. At least that's speculation.
Boy, I've never seen all this.
This stuff I got on newspapers there. I went down to the newspaper and had Xerox made a newspaper article, you know. But if you,
I think we have more information here than we have in our file.
well, maybe some stuff that you don't have, but you have a lot more than I have. Well, they told me at Riverside that palm print on the victim's VW, they weren't even sure that the killer left that, you know. So they're not positive about that one.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about the prints down there. How far
They cleared this Ross Sullivan on that palm print.
they did on the.
They thought they did on the printing too, but they never checked them out against Toski's prints, and so they're going to do that.
Well, that's it. And did he just turn up recently, or did they have him?
Oh, I went
at that time?
I went into the library and talked to some people in there, and they started telling me about this guy. And I talked to his English teacher and other people, and they all felt until this guy was definitely cleared completely.
The files reveal that Ross Sullivan was cleared on a palm print in handwriting in Riverside. And Toski compared his prints to the prints from the Stein cab, and they did not match. This next conversation is between Peterson and Captain Ken Narlow of the Napa County Sheriff's Department.
Then another thing, you know, the poem that was found on the desk, it refers to her new red dress, as I recall. And it so happens that she was wearing a yellow blouse and faded red capris. So the thing doesn't really fit the actualities of the situation as far as what she was wearing. Now, whether the thing was written later and Zodiac forgot that she just had faded red capris and yellow blouse.
Aside from that one professional opinion, and Zodiac later confirming this opinion, what do we really have?
Well, you have the words in the messages. For example, this typed confession. Zodiac says, "I am not sick, I am insane, but that will not stop the game." You have him also saying, referring to game, the nifty game, apparently, in the cipher. Is demanding here that this letter should be published for all to read it. It's so similar to his demands that the newspapers publish his messages later. I think that you can link messages.
I bring this up for this reason. You know, there are times we've come across suspects, and we just run into a brick wall when we try and tie them into Riverside. Good suspects, but we know have been in the Bay Area here, that you know that have been here during the times of the commission of the crime. They said the criminal profile of the guy we're looking for, but yet when we come to chime into that last case down there, we run into a brick wall. Now, I have to ask myself, suppose our guy isn't the responsible. Just supposing.
Well, down there, you know, Captain Cross still is not convinced that it isn't the local guy, and Bud Kelly says I feel 60% that it was our guy, and maybe 40% it was Zodiac, you know. So they're sure not convinced down there that Zodiac committed it. But here you have two samples of writing, the desk and the note, and
How many handwriting experts did you talk to?
you know, that I'm completely ignorant in that phase of it.
I know one thing for sure. A handwriting expert has a difficult time comparing one original copy with another original copy. That's the condition. How much trouble do you think it would be to compare an original copy with a ballpoint pen stretched in wood?
Very difficult. And of course, the typed one was about the third or fourth carbon copy. You know, he was shrewd enough that whoever sent it in to know that you couldn't trace a typewriter that way, or prove it in court anyway. Well, the biggest question mark in my mind about the whole thing is this desk poem referring to her new red dress, when she didn't wear a new red dress, indicating that the guy either forgot or never knew what the hell she was wearing.
Maybe there's some correlation. No.
Right. I think if it worked, that he would have known what she was wearing.
More accurate.
Right. That's the big question mark.
Before. The killer certainly would have known what she was wearing if he had written the poem afterwards.
Right. Right. Well, it wasn't discovered till about 6 months later, right? So why couldn't have been after?
Either 6 months before.
Right. It could have.
What a better way to throw a bunch of cops off my trail and have some expert come on and say, yeah, he did that down there all right. Boy, I say to myself, hey, what a way to throw a curveball. I'll just jump on that and say, yeah, I'm the guy who did it. Let them try and prove it. So they spend the next 10 years trying to tie me to Riverside when they know damn well they can't.
It could very well be, but then again, I go back.
It's not an official standpoint I'm saying, huh? It's just the things that run through my mind after working on it for the last
Right.
7 years.
That could well be. However, when you compare the message, the typed capital letter message, along with what Zodiac wrote later, and of course this was never published up in this area, particularly in its entirety, that I know of.
Actually, it was. In January 1969, the true crime magazine Inside Detective published a 6-page story about the unsolved murder of student Cheri Jo Bates near Riverside City College on October 30th, 1966. The article included information about the crime as well as a readable photograph of the infamous confession letter. Zodiac could have read this article, then been inspired to commit the Zodiac crimes by imitating the work of the Riverside killer and author. When the Riverside author describes killing Cheri Jo Bates, he writes, "She squirmed and shook as I choked her, and her lips twitched." The phrasing is very similar to a confirmed Zodiac letter from July 26, 1970, where Zodiac writes, "Some I shall tie over anthills and watch them scream and twitch and squirm," referring to his slaves in paradise. And the word twitch is identically misspelled in both letters. The details of Bates's murder were made public and exposed to masses of people via Inside Detective magazine and the San Francisco Chronicle newspaper. The information about the Bates case first spread to Northern California specifically through police letters on October 20th, 1969, and then later in an article written by Paul Avery in the San Francisco Chronicle in November 1970. 4 months later, Zodiac claimed responsibility in his March 13th, 1971 letter to the Los Angeles Times. Zodiac took credit for it long after the fact. Many criminal profilers describe criminals as opportunists. Zodiac crimes can be described as opportunistic. Zodiac may be taking credit for the Riverside case, when in fact it wasn't him. Here's more from the conversation between Dave Peterson and Ken Narlow.
That makes me think of another thing now. This Kathleen Johns kidnapping was supposed to have been in March of 70. I was trying to think when Avery came out with his stories on the Riverside thing. Do you recall the approximate date? In other words, I was wondering whether this Johns kidnapping thing came out after the Riverside thing broke. The reason I'm wondering is that this was another car disabling deal, only it was the wheel instead of ripping out the distributor wire and the coil and the condenser, and quite different from many of Zodiac's previous crimes.
Again, putting out false clues.
Well, that's what I'm saying about the kidnapping.
He was to turn us on to Riverside, hoping that we would jump on this guy and just completely lead us out in different tangents. You help us out, Cal.
Well, right.
Lead that many police.
I think the Riverside thing, wasn't that broken in late '69? Did you go down to Riverside? I think you went down, didn't you? You remember about when you went?
Well, it was
Late '69 or
no, it had to have been in the 70s.
how far in,
We didn't get on the Riverside. I know I went down there in a better time of the year, and so after October, November, it would have been kind of the winter season. We went down there, I think, around the spring of '70, probably 6-7 months after.
After the kidnapping, then. I thought maybe the kidnapping could have been done to throw you off and to show another car disabling like Riverside thing.
Didn't know anything about the kidnapping when we went to Riverside.
Oh, you didn't?
Another possible example of a questionable Zodiac claim is in a letter sent to the San Francisco Chronicle on July 24, 1970, in which the Zodiac references the 1970 abduction of Kathleen Johns and her baby near Modesto, California. This kidnapping case came before the Riverside case claim by Zodiac and newspaper attention. It was right in the middle of Zodiac's area of operation, his time frame, and also it involved the MO of a man disabling a car. An assailant flagged down Kathleen the night of March 22, 1970, on Highway 132 near Peterson, California, and offered to help tighten some lug nuts on a loose tire. However, in reality, he ended up disabling her car. Left with no other option, Kathleen and her baby were forced to get into the car with the assailant. After getting into the car, he drove off the freeway and started driving on country roads away from any service station. Mrs. John stated that the driver said nothing, and that when asked where he worked, he stated that he would work for 2 months and then just drive around, mostly at night. When asked if he assisted many couples that were in trouble, he stated that when he got through, that they did not need any help. At this time, Mrs. Johns started to scream and became hysterical. When this writer asked what was wrong, she pointed to a picture on a wanted bulletin and stated that was the man that had picked her up. The picture was that of the Zodiac killer, wanted for murder by the San Francisco Police Department. Mrs. Johns was asked of the two pictures which resembled her abductor, and she pointed to the amended drawing. Mrs. Johns was asked if she had ever seen a picture of this subject before, and she stated that she had not. She was then advised who the picture was of, and again she became hysterical. At this point, the Stanislaus County Sheriff's Department was contacted, and a deputy was requested. And Deputy Jim Lovett was dispatched, and the same story was related to the deputy. Deputy Lovett then left this office in an attempt to locate Mrs. Johns' car, which was found on Mays Boulevard, and that the car was completely burned. The vehicle was about 2 miles past of Interstate 5. Deputy Lovett contacted the San Joaquin County authorities who arrived at the scene. They were advised that the hubcap had been taken from the car by her abductor, and it was requested that fingerprints be taken, as the San Francisco Police Department had a file of latent prints of the Zodiac. However, no prints were lifted from the hubcap because it was covered in grease. Approximately 4 months later, Zodiac sent a letter to the San Francisco Chronicle, which corroborated the account, though he could have based his letter on reports in the newspaper. Kathleen Johns passed away in 2002 and had given conflicting reports about the suspect in the case. Here's more of the conversation between Dave Peterson and Dave Toschi about the Kathleen Johns case.
Speaking of the glasses, this Kathleen Johns claimed that this guy who kidnapped her, she thought was Zodiac. I guess the other day you said that you weren't too convinced that it was. But
No, we
she
weren't.
said that this guy had some kind of elastic band around his glasses holding them on. Like an athlete or a motorcycle rider or
Yeah.
a welder or somebody
Yeah.
like that.
We couldn't tell that from our case. At least our people couldn't. And I know Berryessa couldn't because he had the hood on
Right.
at the time. But he was wearing glasses. And apparently from what Hartnell told Narlo, his people, they didn't appear to be dark glasses. They appeared to be seeing glasses, reading glasses, viewing glasses.
He had some clip-ons, I think, on the hood, as I recall.
Yeah. Yeah. He could see clip-ons. Yeah.
Paul Avery apparently was convinced that she had that Zodiac took her for a ride, the way he wrote his piece in the Chronicle.
Yeah, he seemed very strong. He talked to her personally. He went and talked to her personally, and then talked to me a few days later about it. He was very, very, very convinced that it was a Zodiac, and it's still a good possibility. It may have been Zodiac.
I was disappointed at that time. I wrote the first story on her.
Oh, did you?
And but in the Times Herald, I wasn't given the time or the expense money to go and interview her, you know.
I'll read some of Dave Peterson's article about the Kathleen Johns case. She estimated Zodiac somewhat younger, 30 years. He was about 5 feet 9 inches tall, 160 pounds, lighter than other estimates. Clean-shaven with a pock-marked chin. He wore black, thick-rimmed glasses, held tightly by an elastic band, dark blue nylon windbreaker, dark blue or black woolen bell-bottom trousers, and highly polished black shoes. He spoke in a soft, monotone voice. His car was tan or light color of a late model American make. It had black bucket seats and a messy interior. A black rubber grip flashlight was on the dash. In conclusion of this episode, I'll share a recent breakthrough in the case. In August 2021, the Riverside Police Department's Cold Case Unit published an update regarding the handwritten correspondence, stating that the author of the letters claiming responsibility for Bates's murder had been identified via DNA analysis in 2020 and had admitted to writing the correspondence. According to the update, the author had initially and anonymously contacted investigators in 2016, explaining the correspondence had been a distasteful hoax. This individual expressed remorse and apologized, saying that he had been a troubled teenager at the time and that he had written and mailed the letters as a means of seeking attention. In 2020, the Riverside Cold Case Unit and the FBI Los Angeles Investigative Genealogy Team used DNA evidence from the stamp on the 2016 letter to track down the author and confirm that he wrote both letters. The letter writer, who was a teenager in 1967, wasn't involved in the murder of Bates, investigators determined. We move on from the Cheri Jo Bates case, and that's a big deal. No longer trying to connect Zodiac suspects with her case in Riverside, California. On the next episode of Citizen, this is the Zodiac speaking, we continue digging into Vallejo-Times Herald police reporter Dave Peterson's one-of-a-kind Zodiac case archive, seeking more breakthrough information. For Last in Line Pictures, I'm Trey Borzilleri, and this is Citizen True Crime Podcast. For additional content from this episode, visit the Last in Line Pictures YouTube channel. Search at Last in Line Pictures.